Welcome in to the Nate Real Midwest podcast. I am your host today, and I am the CEO of the Nate Real Midwest podcast. I am very, very, very excited that you guys are with me today. It is 2:55 Central Time and 3:55 Eastern Time. You guys are welcoming me in today. It's a great day. Yesterday, I was at the Fraud Oversight Committee. Like I said, if you are new to my page and stuff, I'm a disability advocate for the state of Minnesota. I am so happy that I'm here with you guys today. We are going to look in at some stuff that are happening across our system and get our system going today. A lot of people are wondering what is happening. Well, the Oversight Committee had the Secretary of State, Samuel Simon, there to talk about the voter fraud and the fraud and investigation that was happening. And I sat in that committee wondering, as a disability advocate for the state of Minnesota, wondering how is this going to happen for our cities and our systems? You know what I mean? It is our systems that are so careful and talking about that we are wondering what our system is going to be and stuff. And that is our systems that are flying our overhead systems and putting it together in a system that is voter fraud, what they're talking about. And today we're going to watch a little bit of it, and then I'm going to get to some questions and answering why this is such a huge deal and what is happening today. So let us get to the video and let's watch it. And let's watch the hearing closely and carefully. So let's watch it today. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. I call the House Fraud Prevention and State Agency Oversight Committee to order. We have a quorum, and today the purpose of the hearing is to talk with the Secretary of State and his team about how we can understand and prevent election fraud. There was a case this summer that we will get into where there were convictions for fraudulent voter registration. But first, before we do that, we are going to approve the minutes of September 17th. Representative Vice Chair Anderson, have you had a chance to review the minutes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have, and I move approval.
Vice Chair Anderson moves approval. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Minutes are approved. All right, so for the order of business, we're going to hear from Bill Glahn from Center of the American Experiment about the two cases, and then the secretary is due to arrive at 10:45, and then he and his team will be invited to join us at the witness table. So with that, Mr. Glahn, welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record.
Madam Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. He's on Zoom for anyone wondering what's going on here.
Okay, Bill Glahn I'm a policy fellow with Center of the American Experiment in Minnetonka, Minnesota.
So I think, Mr. Glahn, we'd like you to go over, you attended the hearings regarding the convictions for the voter registration fraud, and could you just go through a brief explanation of that for the public, and then we'll probably have questions for you.
Okay, as briefly as possible. So I attended as a observer, as a reporter, if you will, 2 court hearings over the summer. One each for 2 people who pled guilty to 1 count each of conspiracy to commit voter registration fraud. And in general, these 2 individuals, I believe at the time, were romantic partners living out of West St. Paul, and they were employed by a foundation as independent contractors. This foundation is named Annika Foundation, and to my knowledge, they have never been accused of any wrongdoing, or no direct employee has ever been accused of any wrongdoing related to voter fraud. But these two contractors, one was named Ronnie Williams. He's also known as Michael Gibson. And then his partner in this conspiracy is named Lorraine Combs. And they were found guilty through guilty pleas of this conspiracy to commit voter registration fraud. And we don't have so many details about exactly what the fraud was, but apparently they, through the Annika Foundation, submitted hundreds of falsified voter registration forms that were submitted to 10 counties around the state. We don't have a list of which counties received the fake voter registration forms, other than the Carver County was mentioned by name in the course of these proceedings. And Lorraine Combs, for her part, she seems to be the junior partner in this conspiracy. She admitted to preparing more than 500 fake voter registration forms. And Ronnie Williams, who appears to be the senior partner in this, also prepared voter registration forms himself that were submitted to these counties. The invented names, identifying information such as dates of birth, social security numbers, addresses. They were paid by the foundation for these voter registration forms. It's not known how much they were paid by the foundation to prepare these, but it is believed that they were all faked. The information contained in the forms did not correspond to any real person, real voter. They were submitted to, as I said, some 10 or more county election offices, and this was in the 2021-2022 election cycle. So not this past cycle, but the cycle before. And apparently this came to the attention of authorities, and eventually the FBI conducted an investigation. And then sometime in late 2024, these two individuals admitted to authorities that they had in fact committed this crime, that they had in fact engaged in this rather large voter fraud effort. And then over the summer, they came in individually. They were indicted individually, well, not indicted, they were charged individually, and they had their own individual hearings where they pled guilty. Neither has been sentenced yet. Ms. Combs is scheduled to be sentenced at the end of this month. And the sentencing guidelines for her, because she doesn't have a past criminal history, range from as low as 0 prison time to 6 months in prison. Mr. Williams' criminal history is much more complicated. Lawyers are still arguing over what the appropriate punishment for his guilty plea would be, the range being from 6 months all the way up to 30 months, 30 months. The maximum penalty for this crime is up to 5 years of imprisonment. And Mr. Williams' sentencing has not been scheduled yet, but it's believed that it will take place sometime next month.
Thank you, Mr. Glahn. So I just had a couple of questions, and I'm sure if my colleagues do, they will join us. So in the indictment or in the charging documents, the 10 counties were never identified, and we will also be checking with the secretary when he comes forward. But do you have any knowledge other than the citing of Carver County in one of the documents, what 10, I've read in other news reports, 15 counties. Was there any clarity on that you have found?
No, nothing more than what you just stated. It was stated at least 10, 10 being the minimum. And then Carver County was mentioned in the context that the U.S. Attorney's Office went out of their way to thank Carver County law enforcement authorities for this effort, for their efforts in supporting these prosecutions. By inference, you would imagine Carver County was one of the 10 or more counties involved.
Thank you. And my understanding is that this group had multiple independent contractors, but 2 were charged. Is that correct?
Correct. The 2 were charged. If you read the documents carefully, and I was in the back of the courtroom and heard the back and forth between the prosecution and defense, there were unnamed others who served as intermediaries or other roles between Mr. Williams and Ms. Combs and the foundation itself. So there were other individuals who you would infer from the context were not employees of Anakin Foundation that somehow played a role in the conspiracy, but these individuals were never named or charged.
Thank you. And that was one of my questions, because it says that the two people that were indicted or charged were then giving the fraudulent voter registrations to people at the foundation, and then it was the foundation themselves that submitted them to the different counties. Is that your understanding?
I would just make a very slight, add a little bit of nuance to that. It sounded like there were registration forms that were submitted directly by the conspirators to the foundation, and perhaps others or more that were submitted indirectly through these intermediaries to the foundation.
Right, reading from.
And it's been made clear that the foundation itself was the entity or people working for the foundation submitted it to the counties. So the conspirators never dealt directly with the counties.
Right. So my understanding, just to clarify the chain, and obviously I will ask the Secretary of Staff this too, so you guys can be ready. But in the document, it says that the charged individual would provide the completed forms to the foundation through its agents, and then the foundation, through its agents, would submit these false voter registration applications to county election officials across the state. So the foundation was never charged. We don't know who these agents were, but this group clearly was defrauded by the individuals submitting the false applications. But then there doesn't seem to be a check, which is our role as the committee, to find how we can provide better oversight. There doesn't seem to be a check when this group submitted the fraudulent applications. So I don't know where that breakdown comes in, but clearly the foundation received the fraudulent applications, hundreds, up to 500 or more, and then they were submitted to the foundation, and then the foundation submitted it to the county election offices. So there's more to understand in this case that I think is in the charging documents. And certainly we look forward to having more of that conversation of how this happened. So that's the end of my questions. Members, anybody else have a question, or should we move on to the Secretary? Oh, Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Golan, in your observation of the hearing, did you witness any discussion regarding why this prosecution was coming from the federal level as opposed to being pursued locally by county attorneys?
Madam Chair, Representative Hudson, I'd have to say no. Again, it's interesting as an observer to many of these sort of hearings where somebody's entering a guilty plea. It tends to be the case that prosecutors and the defense introduce just enough information to convince the judge that the defendant is in fact guilty of the crime they're pleading guilty to. They don't get to a lot of backstory or a lot of extraneous information. It's very narrowly tailored to a very specific purpose. So it's not clear why the FBI got involved. It is clear they were involved because they stated in open court that each of these two individuals who were convicted had admitted their culpability to the FBI. But how the FBI got involved as opposed to the Attorney General or the Secretary of State's office or some state or county authority is unclear. Again, there were, I'm sure, through Congress or the U.S. Senate, I can't recall quite the batting order of the 2022 cycle, but there was a federal election in the fall of 2022. There were state and local elections too. So I imagine there were any number of other ordinances and state laws that were also broken. But this was taken up by the feds.
Yes, Chair Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The lead pinto for this committee. I appreciate it. And just a small thing for Mr. Glahn. I noticed the thanks from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Carver County Sheriff's Office, which is terrific. I also noted that the U.S. Attorney's Office specifically thanked the Office of the Secretary of State as well. And just, I guess, I wanted to see if you have comment on there. I just want to make sure to note that not only Carver County Sheriff's Office, but actually our Secretary of State received specific thanks from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the office's work regarding this.
Thank you,
Madam
Mr.
Chair,
Glahn.
Representative Pinto, all that's correct. I just didn't bring that up because I understood I would be followed by the Secretary of State's office, who can better speak to their own role in the process.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Mr. Glahn. We appreciate your testimony. Now we would like to hear from Secretary of State Simon and his team. Welcome to the committee. Good morning, Secretary Simon. Please state your name for the record. We appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you. Steve Simon, Minnesota Secretary of State. Good morning, Madam Chair and members. It's an honor to be with you. Thank you for the opportunity. The invitation to appear here today was a request to talk about a particular episode that made headlines last June. It's a story really with two parts. The first part is how Minnesota's election system, featuring dedicated election officials in just over a dozen counties in Minnesota, plus staff from our office, worked successfully to prevent would-be fraudsters from harming Minnesota's election system with false voter registrations. The second part is how our office worked with state and federal law enforcement to ensure that the individuals submitting these false voter registrations were brought to justice. And I just want to be clear here that, as you know, this is a case about individuals who conspired to submit false voter registration applications. This is not a case about fraudulent votes. And this is ultimately a case of the system working to detect these applications so they could be appropriately challenged and referred to law enforcement for prosecution and conviction. I'm here with Minnesota State Elections Director Paul Linnell, as well as with Government Relations Director Nicole Freeman and Deputy Secretary of State Julie Strother. I'm going to turn the microphone over to Mr. Linnell in just a minute to give an overview of how the system worked to detect these fake applications, how our office and county partners responded, and how county and state election officials helped the FBI in their investigation over a period of more than 2 years. But before I do that, I just want to make sure that members of this committee know that I personally and the staff from our office are always available to meet with you and your staff to answer any questions that you have about our election system. This is an offer, as some know, that I make regularly to members of the
Okay, but I had to stop right there. I just had to pause for a second. Sorry, we're gonna go back to the video. You're willing to meet with the Minnesota legislature, but you're not willing to meet with the federal government, like Pam Bondi and the district attorney. I mean, the U.S. attorney, like Pam Bondi, federal prosecuting. I mean, it's fine with me, but sir, I mean, if the federal government is asking for voter registration, as a voter in the state of Minnesota and as a disability advocate, yeah, I'd be kind of wondering too on some stuff. Is my vote really counting in some of the big districts like Hennepin County, Carver County? Because Rochester flipped red for Royce White, and that was amazing. But now I'm kind of want to know, because some of these special elections that we're having, they're quite interesting, okay? So, Secretary Simon, you need to really shape up, because I wish I was testifying, but I sat in that committee there. You could have stopped. Go back to that video. You could saw that video right there. But Secretary Simon, as a voter and a disability advocate, yeah, I actually have some questions that you need to answer for of this voter fraud, because people have came out in the state of Minnesota and said there was voter harvesting and stuff. We've had people, whistleblowers, talking about voter harvesting. Madam Chair, I don't know why that was not asked at the time of the fraud investigation hearing yesterday, voter harvesting is a thing in the state of Minnesota. It has happened before. I am not making this thing up. Look it up. Go search. Do the research yourself. And for the young youth that are watching this podcast, do the research. I'm not here to switch your mind. I want you to do the research. I want you to go out there and do the deep diving of our government, of our presidency, and not listen to what the mainstream media wants to say and how's to say. Look at all politicians. Don't look at one simple politician because the mainstream media says this person is bad, says this person is a racist. Look at everything out there before he got into politics, what he did after that, and before all that sort of stuff. Because the mainstream media will not feed you the truth. They're not going to. They're going to preach a narrative that fits their narrative, and that's the problem with the mainstream media, and that's why I do not own cable TV. Hash note, I do not. The only time I got cable TV was for the World Series, because I promised somebody I was going to stream that. So that is the question for my youth is, I'm not here to switch your vote. If you want to vote Democrat, that is fine. But I want you to really research the Democratic Party and research some high politician. You're going to watch some stuff. I can encourage you to watch The Fall of the Cabal. Go out there and watch The Fall of the Cabal. Look it up. Because that's going to tell you some stuff. And might bring some opening eyes in our system today. Well, let's get back to the videos today and stuff, and let's mark that up. I think we can mark that up today, but let's go back and let's get back to our video. Thank you guys.
The Elections Committee and their staff, but I want to make sure to extend the offer to this committee and staff as well. So if members and staff don't already have my personal cell phone number, I will make sure that you get it. You can call me or text me anytime. And the follow-up, by the way, doesn't just have to be in your offices. As Representatives Hudson and Greenman and others know, I'm happy to meet in your community and do voter education events as well. So if there are questions or concerns after this presentation, this afternoon, tomorrow, next week, whenever, or if you want to know more about an unrelated election issue, please don't hesitate to reach out to me personally or to our office. Now I'm going to hand the microphone over to Mr. Linnell, because to appreciate how these registrations were caught does require an understanding of the various safeguards in Minnesota's voter registration system. Now, there are some members of this committee who now serve or have served on the Elections Committee, but many have not. So I've asked Mr. Linnell to give just a brief overview of how the state's voter registration works, basically, along with the checks contained within the system. Mr. Linnell will then explain how the false voter registrations in this particular case were flagged, and how staff from the Office of Secretary of State and county election officials responded and coordinated with law enforcement to ensure that the individuals attempting to perpetrate this fraud were caught and charged. Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'll yield with your permission to Mr. Linnell.
Thank you, Secretary Simon. We hope you will stay as well to answer some questions. And welcome to the committee, Mr. Linnell. Please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. My name is Paul Linnell, and I am the Director of Elections with the Office of the Secretary of State. I've been with the office since 2022, and in my current role going back to July of last year. Before coming to the office, I served as the elections lead in Anoka County. So for my presentation this morning, I'd like to start by providing an overview of how the voter registration and verification process works in Minnesota. Then I will cover how election officials in Minnesota work throughout the year to ensure that our voter rolls are accurate and up to date. As requested by the committee, I'll also include details about the Electronic Registration Information Center, or ERIC, a multi-state member-led organization that assists with voter list maintenance. Then I'll briefly talk through what happens after Election Day to process Election Day registrations and enter voting history. And finally, I'll spend some time walking through the series of events that led to 2 individuals pleading guilty to charges of conspiracy to commit voter registration fraud earlier this year. To start, I'll provide a brief summary of the roles and responsibilities for administering voter registration in Minnesota. The Secretary of State serves as Minnesota's chief election official. Among the duties for the Office of the Secretary of State is the responsibility for defining, maintaining, and administering the statewide voter registration system, or SVRS. The Elections Division of the office includes a team of state program administrators and IT staff that support the voter registration system and several other related tools, including public-facing voter tools like online voter registration and the polling place finder. The office is also responsible for developing forms for use in elections, including the voter registration application and preparing and publishing information about elections. The office also has responsibility for training and certifying county elections officials. It is the county auditor that serves as the chief registrar of voters and the custodian of official voter registration records in each county. This is an elected position in some counties and appointed in others. In some counties, especially those with large numbers of registered voters, elections responsibilities are delegated to an elections director or manager. In the vast majority of counties, elections and voter registration is just one of the many responsibilities for the county auditor. Other duties may include property records, taxation, licensing, finance, and more. County elections officials are responsible for carrying out most functions related to voter registration, including the entry of new voter registration applications or updating existing records in the statewide voter registration system. The county auditor is then responsible for training and certifying municipal clerks on their election administration responsibilities and also training election judges. Municipal clerks' elections responsibilities largely revolve around serving as the filing officer for their jurisdiction's offices, creating precinct boundaries, and designating election day polling places and recruiting and employing election judges. Several municipalities, primarily larger cities, also administer absentee voting, including facilitating election day registration for in-person absentee voters. At the polling place on election day, election judges are responsible for managing the polling place rosters and administering the election day registration process for voters that are not yet registered or need to update their information on election day. However, all of the actual entry and processing of voter registration applications is managed at the county level. Voter registration in Minnesota is limited to only those who meet the eligibility criteria to register and vote. One must be a U.S. citizen and must be at least 16 years old to submit a voter registration application. Those who are not yet 18 are set to a pending status until their 18th birthday when their voter record becomes active. Registrants must have been a resident of Minnesota for at least 20 days prior to registering. Those who are incarcerated for a felony conviction cannot register to vote while they're incarcerated. And individuals are not eligible to register if a court has taken away their right to vote as part of a guardianship or if they've been found legally incompetent. At the time of registration, voters affirm their eligibility to vote through the signing of a certification statement detailing all of these eligibility requirements and a statement that defines the penalties for falsifying information on a voter registration form. All voter registration applications must undergo a 2-step verification process. The first part of this process is to confirm that the voter is who they say they are. This is done by matching data provided on their application to a government database. Most matching takes place behind the scenes when the record is checked against the Department of Public Safety database. For voter registrations that come from Driver and Vehicle Services, those records have already been verified as a match since the record is on file with DPS. Similarly, any registration applications that are submitted through the online voter registration application are only passed along for registration if the information provided on that application form can be matched against data in the DPS or Social Security Administration database. For voters that are registering using a paper application, the data that's provided on that form is entered into SVRS by the county and then sent to DPS to be verified. If there's a match, then the voter status in the system will change from to be verified to verified. If there's not an exact match to one in the DPS database, but there are potential matches. Those potential matches are queued for the county to review and determine whether the voter record and the DPS record are the same person. A common example of a situation where there is an exact match, or where there's not an exact match, is when someone has a hyphenated last name and does not exactly match between the two databases. This would require a manual review to determine that the record corresponds to the same person. There also may be cases of data entry errors or instances where the information provided on the voter registration application may not have been clearly written. Some common data entry issues may include transposing ID numbers or handwriting, where a 9 may look like a 4. When the record is returned for further review, it provides the county election official an opportunity to review that data and confirm whether anything may have been entered incorrectly. If the record cannot be verified through DPS and the applicant has provided the last 4 digits of their social security number, then their information is sent to the SSA database for verification. If there's not a match, the county election official must use other methods to attempt to verify the voter's identity. This may include record searches, contact by mail, phone, or email. There's a 10-day window for counties to review those records that cannot be matched. And for any records that cannot be verified, the registration is flagged as incomplete. Here's a diagram that shows the workflow what I just described for any new record or an update to an existing voter record. As noted on the previous slide, all voters start with sending their data through the DPS database to determine if there's a match with an existing record. Additional review then takes place for cases where there's not an exact match, but potential matches are identified. If there's not a match with the DPS record and we have the last 4 of the social security number, it's sent to that SSA database for review. SSA only returns the record as a match if there's an exact match with the data that is provided. So again, for that voter with the hyphenated name, it would not be returned as a match if there are discrepancies between how the name is listed. Finally, if a record cannot be verified through DPS or the SSA, it is reviewed by the county auditor, and if it cannot be verified, it's marked in the system as incomplete. For any records that are marked as incomplete, a notice is queued in the statewide voter registration system for the county to mail to the registrant. The content of that notice will vary depending on how the voter applied to be registered and whether they are a first-time voter. As required by federal law, incomplete registrations for first-time voters that are registering by mail and who have not voted in a federal election must either complete their registration with the county auditor before the election or provide an acceptable identification document when arriving to vote on election day. These registrants will be marked with a CID designation on the polling place roster and must provide ID to the election judge before they are allowed to vote.
Exactly.
A voucher cannot be used to clear the CID requirement for these voters. It must be an acceptable photo ID. All other incomplete registrations are marked as challenged, unverifiable, and they must clear the challenge to affirm their eligibility before being permitted to vote. If there's any evidence that a voter is not eligible to vote, that must be referred to the county attorney for investigation.
Pardon me, Mr. Linnell, can I just ask a question there while I'm thinking of it? Thank you. So you said that if it's flagged as CID, they must provide an acceptable photo ID. So in these cases, a utility bill is not sufficient?
Madam Chair, in those cases, it would be the photo ID that's used in combination with a utility bill as an acceptable proof of residence document for election day registration purposes. So the distinction is that the vouching process, which is acceptable for registering to vote on election day, would not be applicable for this group of incomplete registrants who are marked on the roster as CID.
Thank you. So just to drill down one more, it must include a photo ID of some type.
Correct.
Thank you. And just a second, Vice Chair Anderson. But this is for people who've never voted in federal elections before. And we'll talk about the next case where they may have been inactive. Next, I'm assuming?
Madam Chair, that's correct. The requirement for marking these records as CID on the roster is a federal requirement that applies just to first-time voters who have not yet voted in a federal election. If
Well, I'm not going to take all of your time. watching that video. That video was 2.5 hours long. So that gives you the full spectrum of Department of Human Services, not the Secretary of State and his lead directors and what was going on. But voter fraud is a thing. I'm sorry to say. There is no perfect way of thinking that you are not going to get out without having voter fraud. It's a thing. Voter fraud is a thing, and it's not a joke. It's a serious command. And I think a lot of people think that voter fraud was, it can't happen. Well, if people can commit disability fraud, there can be voter fraud. So my question is for you, if there is voter fraud, what side of the aisle is doing it? Democrats are going to say that Republicans are going to do it. Okay? Republicans are going to say the Democrats are doing it. So what truth is going to aisle you to look at what voter fraud is? What truth is that? Let's look at the example of voter fraud here, and let's go look at a system that is we're gonna look at, darn it, that's not gonna even help what I really want to do. Fridge. That makes it really look bad for you guys. See, I'm still learning how to do this. Let's go look at an example here. Let's go to, sorry about that, we have all of this. Let's go type in a Word document. Let's see if my Word document is going to come up. That ended everything. Okay. Let's look at this together. Let's look at this. Maybe it will let me share. It's gonna be like, oh, you're working on a computer. Well, yeah, I am working on a computer. That's not gonna work. Let's see what we can do. A window. Yeah, there we go. Okay. All right, let's look at this. This is an overview of what we call, and this is an overview that I wrote up for people to understand, introduction voter fraud. Let's look at this introduction to voter fraud right here. Introduction to voter fraud refers to illegal interference with electoral process, typically by an individual or groups attempting to affect the outcomes of election, all officials of voter fraud thing. So that's going to be your introduction that you're going to have to figure out. An examination of voter fraud application safeguards in Minnesota. This is an introduction that I came up with and wrote. Non-citizens voting while individuals who are not legally eligible to vote cast ballots. I believe that's happening in the state of Minnesota. I'm sorry. If we're allowing non-citizens to vote and they're taken away from the citizens to vote in America, that's a problem, okay? You need to be a citizen of the United States to vote in a federal election. And hopefully a state election. I don't believe there's exceptions for state elections. And I don't know why that they're putting 16 to register as to vote. I don't believe 16 you need to register as to vote. I believe you need to vote you need to be registered to vote at 18 when you get your driver's license. I don't get it why they're saying 16 to 17 is you can't vote at 16 to 17. The federal age to vote in the state of Minnesota is 18, and that's across the United States. So when you saw that previously that they're putting up and stuff, is that they are not coming to a fact of the matter, is that they're thinking, okay, we can register these people at 16 and 17. Why are we registering these people at 16 and 17? They cannot vote. They have 2 years to wait to vote or a year to vote. They cannot vote. So we need to get rid of the age of registration 16 and 17. 18 is when you register to vote. There is no 17 mark. 16 you can't because you have 2 years for the election of that year. My first voting election of presidential is 2020, and I voted again in 2024. I missed me voting again for my state election in 2017. And I do have questions about the 2017 election. I do have questions, a lot of questions that lead to that and stuff. That is the questions that need to be compensated and done for while we are questioning a narrative of why we are voting like this. Hold on, I'm trying to fix it. I'm sorry, you guys. Why we are voting like this, okay? The questions that I need answered are questions that need to be answered. So this is a whole ballot harvesting, abuse, manipulations. That's what we were actually having, is ballot harvesting. I'm surprised that was not brought up to the committee. That was not brought up to the committee at all. That thing was not brought up to the committee. Not one committee member said nothing about that. So, that's quite concerning, ladies and gentlemen. Not one committee member literally talked about the ballot harvesting. So this is an Minnesota voter fraud overview and context of what this is happening. This explains to you that people out there will commit voter fraud for a certain party. And what that certain party will do is they will commit that in that way that is illegal interference. The Secretary of State knows it. But he's like, well, yeah, we'll try to stop it. Well, how about you try to stop it every time it happens? Not just once. How many other times has this voter fraud happened and people have not caught it? And people are now catching it now. That's another question I think needs to be answered. And I think if I was the chairman of that committee, I would be straight up and say, how many times has another voter fraud has been opened? How many times that voter registration verification of the state database? Why are you not willing to send this to the federal government? Because I would like an internal investigation in our voter registration, because I want to make sure that my vote is counted. Because if I represent a party, I want to make sure that my vote is counted. I don't want somebody's vote to overcount mine because somebody win that you guys can keep a majority because you're not happy of a majority. That's what I want. Governor Walz, I have a question for you. Stop calling special elections early. You could have waited until we were back in session. You did not need to call these special sessions early. You could have waited. Well, the only reason that you wanted to call a special session early is because you did not like the fact that the Republicans had the majority, and that's why you wanted it tied. These special elections need to stop. I think that there needs to be a bill in